Welcome to the NWI.com Political Roundtable for Wednesday, April 11th. I'm Robert Blaszkiewicz, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Joining with me today, Doug Ross, Editorial Page Editor of The Times. Plenty to talk about. Let's jump right in. Doug, starting to talk about the presidential campaign, which narrowed with the announcement by Rick Santorum that he would be jumping out. He would suspend his campaign. Which pretty much leaves Mitt Romney, which we kind of knew it was going toward that for a long time. But it basically leads us into the general election now, the matchup between Mitt Romney and President Obama.
Right, and this means a couple of things. One, of course, means, we finally get to the debate between Republicans versus Democrats. And so we get to, really the crux of the whole issue. But what it also means is there's kind of less incentive to vote in the Republican primary in Indiana.
Right.
Because it'll be, it's already decided.
Right.
So,
for those who are just concerned with presidential, there's plenty of other things to vote for.
There's a lot of red meat on the table there.
So, yeah. But it's interesting to see how Mitt Romney has seemed to have suffered in his approval ratings through the primary. He seems to be pretty scarred by the primary battle, and we saw some polling this week that really revealed the gender gap in terms of the support of women. Women overwhelmingly support Obama more than Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney has an advantage with men, but not to the degree that Obama has the advantage with women.
Oh, and I know that sounds bad, but that's the way it is. The stereotype that the Republican Party is a white male party, is reflected in these polls, and so now they've really got a short time to try to do something about that.
And he's had to take some very conservative positions on things like immigration, things that could hurt him in the general election. So the question, and it became kind of a talking point when one of his campaign spokespersons talked about using the Etch-a-Sketch when you get to the general election.
Right. He's being shaken right now.
It's going to be tough for him to do that. And obviously President Obama, in a speech last week, and I think some talks this week, he's already in that campaign mode where he's really hitting the Republican, particularly the Paul Ryan budget, which was touted something that Todd Rokita visited with us last week, and he touted the Ryan budget.
Right. This was the idea that we need an adult conversation about the budget deficit, and actually do something about it instead of just whining about it.
Right.
So the Ryan budget will go nowhere. Right. Of course, because it'd have to go through the Senate, which is Democratic at this point. So what this means going forward. Yeah. What I'm wondering is, you're hearing a lot of talk about. And anybody but Obama candidate being Romney.
The Ryan budget is really a rhetorical tool right now.
Right.
It's something that the Republicans are using to smack the Democrats, saying they're not serious about deficit reduction. It's something that the Democrats are using.
Which is a good strategy, by the way.
Yeah, but it's also something the Democrats are using against Republicans, saying they're going to have draconian cuts to Medicare and other social safety net programs. This is what Republicans want to do. So it's an interesting matchup.
And it's a discussion of cuts versus tax increases, and in particular, if you do have tax increases, who do you want to put the burden on?
Right.
We looked at you mentioned Todd Rokita. One of the things he pointed out was that this has gone through. Any number of presidents, dating all the way back to John F. Kennedy and his presentation. And my take on that is when you look at the slide he was showing, and I wrote about this in my column. The slide's online now. When you look at this, you see that the Republicans, except for Obama, the Republicans were even worse than the Democrats in this regard. So, and I realize it's not all the president's doing. The Congress matters,
and a lot of it's Congress, and a lot of it's the economy too.
Exactly.
If you're president during an economic downturn, as Obama has been, you're not going to have the revenue coming into the federal coffers that you would
Exactly.
in an up economy, as Clinton had, was
Right.
lucky enough to be in there during a
Right.
boom. Moving on to right to work, very interesting this week. We saw the local, the Operating Engineers Union,
right. Local 150.
file suit in federal court to stop the right to work legislation, and it was interesting the grounds that they used. They said that it violated the freedom of speech, and they were using as an example Citizens United. Citizens United is a Supreme Court, very controversial Supreme Court decision that basically opened up corporate money coming into political elections, on the grounds that this is corporate free speech. The unions kind of turned that around and said, hey, if we're not allowed to freely bring in union funds, then our free speech is being blocked. What are the chances of them? This is a kind of a strange argument. What do you think the chances of that?
I think they're going to smack it down personally, and because this runs counter to the individual right to free speech to say, I don't believe in what you're saying, and I don't want to fund it.
It's one thing to be free to spend your own money to put a political ad on the air. It's another thing for another agency to collect your money in order for them to put a political ad. So there's kind of two different things. The other aspect to their argument, though, I think does have some grounds in that part of right to work is that they would be required to provide union services for entire workplace, whether or not they pay union dues or not. And compelling a union to provide services that they're not paid for, I think there is some argument there that
I think there is. I mean, basically, and the way it was before was, you didn't have to join a union necessarily for most places, but you had to pay the representation costs. Right. And
for them negotiating contracts and getting benefits for you,
all those things. Sure. You just didn't pay for the political activism.
Right.
And things like that. So.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to see. It'll play out right here in Hammond Federal Court. So it's certainly going to be a case that we're going to watch very closely and have coverage of. Something else that this week we were paid a visit by the state school chief, Tony Bennett.
Right.
And he had some very, very interesting observations about his interactions with the Gary Community Schools.
Right. I mean, the way I would characterize this is you have the kindergarten report card. You have, all of these things that you're graded on. It works well with others. Well, Gary's school board members and the Gary administrators would be marked poorly on that, and they'd be probably counted as runs with scissors in this case. I mean, in terms of, really what it comes down to is just not, the Gary School Corporation is just not fitting into the new era that Indiana has, and, frankly, with Karen Freeman Wilson as mayor, that Gary has. I mean, they're just, stuck in the old mindset.
Yeah, he kind of laid out just this litany of problems in the Gary schools, where they aren't being accountable, they aren't providing the requisite.
Well, here's an example. The state had to hold open the window of opportunity for applying for Title I funds, and this is huge because Gary needs this federal money to be able to provide the extra instruction, tutoring, and whatnot for children who need the extra help with reading and all these things. And why did it take the extra time for Gary to apply? I mean, that's a school corporation in crisis to me.
And Bennett's exasperation was pretty obvious when we talked to him, because it was he had come up here to speak to the school board at their meeting on Tuesday.
Last night.
Yeah, last night, and he was, he said he had this on his calendar for 2 months, and then suddenly,
as we had his meeting with us on our calendar,
right, and then suddenly he was basically disinvited by the school board, and requested that they discuss these matters in private. And of course,
which, you know, the state open meetings law doesn't allow that.
right.
And,
Right. There's limited things that they can't, personnel matters, certain things that they can discuss in private, but the things that Tony Bennett wanted to discuss with them are certainly
Right.
things that should be out, and it should be out in public. They should,
Absolutely.
the community should be able to hear what he has to say. They should be able to hear the school board's response. So there's a definite transparency problem in the Gary School Board.
And my take on this is something that the citizens of Gary, you know, whether you have a child in the schools or not, this is something that the citizens of Gary should be very concerned about.
Yeah.
Because this is economic development. I mean, who's going to want to move to a city
Right.
where, you know, the schools are so unresponsive?
And as you mentioned, it could come down, you know, the one kind of hammer that the state has is funding.
Right.
And that funding hammer could come down on the schools, and who's going to get hurt? The kids.
Children, of
The
course.
kids. So you know what? It's time for the school board to be held accountable.
And I think you'll see some fast responses.
Yeah.
Whether you see some change, I guess, remains to be seen.
Sure. Well, one last thing I want to mention, we're speaking to you on Wednesday afternoon. This evening there will be a debate in Indianapolis between the Republican U.S. Senate candidates, current Senator Richard Lugar, his challenger, State Treasurer Richard Murdoch. Fascinating race. It's gonna go a long way, I think, in introducing Murdoch to. Obviously, people in the state know who Lugar is. They don't necessarily know who Murdoch is. So, it's going. You know, it's going to go a long way to introducing him to the voters, and we'll see if he can overtake Lugar, who is vulnerable.
He is.
Yeah.
You know, he's battling the battle of his life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting.
I will be actually online during the debate. If if you're happen to watch this video before the debate, if you watch the debate at 6 p.m., I believe it's going to be on Lakeshore TV
Right.
broadcast tonight. If you want to hop on NWI.com, I will be kind of giving a live blow-by-blow commentary and taking questions. And hopefully, if you want to jump in and add your 2 cents, we'll have that on a live chat. So it should be fun.
It should be.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all we have for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with another political roundtable.